Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. This is your host, Padma Ali. Today, we're going to be talking about balancing yin and yang. That term it's quite popular right now, which is the masculine and the feminine. And today I have a very special guest who's actually going to be talking to us about how, when you balance your yin and yang, you actually attract more wealth, more abundance into your life. It really got me very curious, and I think you will really enjoy this episode. So we have a very special guest. She's one of my dear friends, Angela Noelle. And without any further delay, you will get to hear her in a few minutes. Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast, so you can create the life you desire by tapping into your inner wisdom. I'm your host, Padma Ali. I'm widely known in the field of psychology as helping create long-lasting transformation. And now, I'm here to help you create the life you desire using the combination of neuropsychology and ancient healing practices. This podcast is for you overachievers who are ready to unlock your highest potential so you can live the life of your dreams without the hustle. I'm here to guide you through a process of self-discovery to be the creator of your destiny. You can have that fulfilling career, that relationship, the abundance, all by taking aligned actions, simply by tapping into the power of your brain, your inner wisdom, and ancient practices. So tune in, folks. I am so delighted you're here. So welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. This is your host, Padma Ali. And today we have a very amazing guest, Angela Noelle. And the reason I decided to invite her to be a guest in today's journey is because this money series, I wanted to bring in different voices, different perspectives, and hoping is not the right word, knowing that these different perspectives, these different voices will hit something for somebody. And so there we are. I'm sitting in front of this beautiful lady, Angela Noelle, and she has a beautiful smile. I'll give you a little background about Angela and I in a little while, but I'm just going to let Angela introduce herself and we'll get started.
So Angela, hi, Padma.
Welcome, Angela. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, I'd love to. First of all, thank you for having me as a guest. It is quite an honor to be here. And I'm so excited about our conversation. So as Padma mentioned, my name is Angela Noelle. I am a prosperity coach for driven but exhausted solopreneurs, and in particular solo practitioners such as acupuncturists, chiropractors, massage therapists. And I help them balance their masculine and feminine energies, tap into their spiritual side or their higher self. And I also help them change their brain set so that they can have financial abundance.
Beautiful. Love that. And love what you're doing, especially for solopreneurs. Having been a solopreneur for a long time, I think this is such an amazing gift. But I also think today, like as we're talking about this, what you're going to be sharing will be helpful for anyone listening, because our money is such a hot topic.
You think?
Yeah, and I felt very drawn to talking about money because money was one of the biggest struggles I've had, even though my life never reflected it in the internally, there was such a struggle. So I'm wondering, Angela, if you can share your experience of what brought you to being a prosperity coach, because that might help shed some light on the money stuff.
Yeah. Sure, I would love to. Actually, my original background is in Chinese medicine. So I had an acupuncture practice in Boston for a decade, just about a decade. And then I had a second office closer to home for the last 3 years up until August of 2020. So just a few months ago,
Yay.
thank you. I closed the practice for good. It was always in my plans to do that. So I had nothing to do with any of the current events. So, but what I was finding as a solo practitioner was a sense of frustration, I guess would be the best word to describe it, because most of my patients were coming in for physical ailments. And I love acupuncture and herbs. I love it so much. I love what the medicine can do for people. But what I was finding was that it was very limiting to treat people in this way, to just treat only their physical body. And oftentimes what I noticed is that they would come back. I mean, it was great for business, but they would be like permanent patients, or they would come back, they would feel better, and then they would come back 3 months later, 6 months later, saying with the same struggles. And it really came down to, there was a combination of a lot of different things, but it came down to, for me, the fact that I wanted to move out of Boston, and B, I realized that it was so important for these people, in order to have permanent change, they needed to do that work on the inside. And the reason why I am choosing to work with my clients in the prosperity department is because if you don't have a high prosperity consciousness, and it's all connected, right? So who we are on the inside,
Yep.
is how our world is reflected on the outside. So oftentimes that is something that I saw with my acupuncture patients. It's something that shows up often with my coaching clients as well, is the struggle for money. So it's not a matter of helping people build wealth and become rich just for the sake of having the things, right? Though that is a nice side effect. It's a matter of really working with them to build that internal self, from using brain habits, yin and yang balance, or masculine and feminine energies, helping them balance that out, because oftentimes they're really exhausted, really tired. They have adrenal fatigue. They have a lot of physical. So I'm still working with them with the physical symptoms. And then also just tapping into their higher self, because we've been programmed for so long to follow what somebody else taught us, whether it be in school or our parents, how we were brought up. So it's really just an all-encompassing, holistic approach to gaining wealth, and being prosperous is like a side effect of all of this internal work. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, you said a lot of amazing different things, and I wanted to unpackage some of those if that's okay with you. I think it's so valuable. So you said, at least what I heard you say is like, who we are on the inside is what's reflected on the outside, and that is connected with prosperity as well. And not only that, just helping people just make the money means they could lose it. Like it can just go away if they haven't shifted from the inside, is what I gathered.
Yes.
So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so I understand the question, like if we are not, okay, I think I understand it. So yeah, I think that, so what I was finding was that if you are not, so I was just listening to a podcast before we talked today, and one of the examples given, which I often give it in when I do my live talks too, is the idea of New Year's Day, right? New Year's Day when people want to lose weight, so they join the gym. And they go to the gym and they maybe join for 2, 3, 4 weeks. I think by February 17th, I think 90% of the new members have tapped out, because it's not a matter of doing, right? It's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make this money, right? I'm going to go to this seminar, and as a result, I'm going to bring in all this wealth. As a result of going to the gym, I'm going to lose 40 pounds. There's more to that. And that is why what I'm noticing is when people are saying money, and so many of us, me included, grew up with this impression that when money just comes out, as soon as money comes in, it goes back out again, because it's not a matter of saving money, right? Or making money or working harder. It's actually a process that goes on in your brain that's very subconscious, that comes as a result of values that we were taught or we learn up until the age of 7. I think it actually happens from a very young age.
Yeah. That's so true. And I can totally relate to that too. I grew up, there was such this discrepancy, right? I would see our life, and on the one hand, life looked fine, but watching my parents, or watching especially my mom, like feeling really stressed out about money, like the impressions that had. So what you're saying is all those things play a role in how we act today, right?
Absolutely. Because when you think of it, those of you that are parents, I'm guessing you have a lot of listeners that are parents, right?
Yeah.
Children, we often say children, I don't have kids, but children are sponges. They're literally watching your every move. And I actually heard this really interesting thing that babies, they're watching every like micro movement in your face, right? So if the baby is complaining and the parent is frustrated and they scowl, the baby picks up on that. They see that, even if you think that they're not watching or they don't notice because they're little. So children are picking this up. It's amazing. It's such a young age. So I heard those stories from my mom and my dad, and especially just the struggle, right?
Yes.
The struggle of my dad had his own business, and it was just money was always a worry. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I see that in my own kids too. And I'm very, very conscious about what I tell them about money. Like my husband and I have made it very, very clear to each other that we will never use the word "it's expensive" ever. Like that is erased from our dictionary. And it doesn't mean that we buy them everything they want, but it's more, if they want something, our answer is always yes and yes and. And so it's something that we've worked on consciously changing how we talk to them about money, and like just having them feel like it's abundantly available, because it is. It is.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious, like you talked about yin and yang balance, and I'm curious like how you use that to shift your clients, especially around prosperity, because that's a very unique way to work with money. I'm thinking like prosperity consciousness and
I'm really glad you touched upon this, because the yin and yang balance, or masculine, it's our masculine and feminine, right? So yin and yang theory comes from it's the basis of Chinese medicine, with the idea that ideally everything should be in balance, and eventually will balance itself out, right? If whether we
So I'm interrupting you for a second. So maybe you can give the listeners a context of what yin and yang balance is in general, like, because I'm not sure everybody understands that. And then go into how that's related to prosperity consciousness. That would be great if you can
absolutely
simplify that.
Yeah. So yin. So in Chinese medicine, it comes from, what I love about it so much is it comes from this idea that everything needs to be in balance. Everything needs to be in balance. So when you look at, the moon and the sun, right? The moon is yin, the sun is yang. when you look at like masculine and feminine, like, yeah, we have probably almost 50-50, right? Men and women on this planet. Maybe sometimes it's 48-52. So the idea is if we lose that balance, right? So when talking about the body as a microcosm of the universe, that's when we get the symptoms. That's when we get illness. That's when we get back pain. And because the body has this need to always be in balance, if we don't work on that balance ourselves, the body's going to figure a way to balance it out for us by telling us, hey, I don't like the way that you're treating me right now. I'm gonna give you some kind of symptom so you pay attention, right? And in our society, we favor masculine energy.
That's so true. Work, 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 work.
Yes. And for those that are unfamiliar with this concept, right, I feel like people are starting to talk more and more about it. But masculine energy is, it's the sun, right? It's the daytime. It's being awake and being driven. And I got to get it done. And work, like you said, work, 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 work. And where women are rewarded for multitasking, right? And we're learning more and more that that's not really even possible. It's not possible for the brain to multitask.
No.
And what happens over time is that we burn out our yin. So symptoms such as our feminine, right? And oftentimes the feminine is getting pushed aside. So oftentimes women show up with hormonal imbalances or sleep deprivation or the inability to sleep. So I hope I answered. I don't want to get too tangential.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is if that's not in balance, not only does it result in physical ailments, but it will show up also in emotional imbalances.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's really, in Chinese medicine, we learn that there's no difference between the body and the mind, right? I mean, there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of medicines that teach that, and you probably have heard the mind-body connection, right? So when you think of stress, right? Stress, like a mental symptom such as stress or anxiety, is often the result of, or it could be the beginning symptom, let's say that, and everybody is different, but it can be the beginning of perhaps a physical symptom. So yeah, there's no difference really. Everything is connected. The body is always going to follow the mind.
That is so true. So share with us, what is the connection that you notice between the yin and yang imbalance and prosperity consciousness? How does that connect?
Yeah, that is a really good question, Padma. So what I find is, as a result of not honoring that very delicate and important balance, it can turn into, like you said, like overwork, for example. Like we feel like we have to overwork in order to make the money. And that's too much that's like an excess, right, of masculine energy that can lead to other problems. And it's not allowing enough feminine energy in. And feminine energy is the energy of receivership. Right? So
yeah,
oftentimes, and I hear this a lot with couples that I know or couples that I've worked with, is that when we're talking about no matter what the sexual orientation, if one person tends to be more masculine, because masculine energy can happen no matter what your gender is, as does feminine energy. And there's usually imbalances happen sorry, I feel like I'm getting off course because you asked me about prosperity, but I'm just using this as an example, right? In couples, when there's too much masculine and too much feminine energy with one partner, oftentimes that offsets the energy in the relationship, and that can happen with money too. That can be reflected in your prosperity consciousness when you have an imbalance of these attributes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So here's this thing just flashed in my head as you were talking about this. It's like a hose pipe, right? Like for a hose to function really well, it has to be able to receive the water, right, from one end, the tap flowing in, and then the other end is the giving, where it's letting out this water for the plants or whatever is happening on the outside. So if you block off the receiving, which is the feminine, if there's an imbalance with that and there's just so much focus on giving, 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 at some point it'll dry out. It's almost like there'll be nothing more to give, which means your money situation also starts to get affected by that. Is that a right way to kind of see it?
I think that's a really great metaphor to explain it, because so often, I mean, that's exactly what happens, right? When we're always favoring the masculine, like, I don't have enough money. I mean, I see this so commonly. I'm guessing you probably do too with the people you work with. I don't have enough money, so I'm going to do more. I'm going to tap out my feminine. I'm going to tap out my adrenals. And what do you have left? Like, oftentimes, yeah, you might get a little more money from doing that, from overworking. But when we're talking about like infinite possibility, infinite potential, right? You need to have that balance of the masculine and feminine energies in order to have prosperity.
Yeah, it's like limiting the infinite, like money. And to me, is at this point, my understanding, which I've taken a long time to get here, is money is infinite. It's
Yes.
just abundance everywhere. And by not honoring that, like you're trying to limit the unlimited, and which makes it really hard to then, I don't know, does that make sense? Like, am I getting that right?
Yeah, you're getting it right. It's money is energy, right? It's just an extension of who we are, right? It has really no meaning other than it just symbolizes. I like to look at money as it symbolizes who we are on the inside. So if we look into our bank account and we have debt, or we're not happy with the numbers, that might be a good opportunity to go within, maybe do some journaling, do some inner work with a professional to help you shift your consciousness and your subconscious values. That's another really important piece, because like we were talking about earlier with children, we learn these things early on, and a lot of times we don't even realize it until later in life. We're like, why can I never get ahead? So I do think it's a combination of tapping into this balance of yin and yang, masculine, feminine, and changing our prosperity conscious through changing our brain habits, our brain set.
Yeah, those beliefs are so sneaky. That's my biggest way. That's the best way I can summarize that. Those beliefs are so sneaky. They just sneak in and become part of your story.
And something just came to me that I'd like to add is those beliefs often are very masculine in quality to begin with, right? If you think about it, like I would say more like masculine out of balance, because masculine in balance is giving, right, and taking action, right? But the masculine out of balance is worrying, right, or doing to the point of overwork. Like, I think of that as being a very masculine quality. So yeah, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because it's helping me even further understand the depths of the masculine and feminine in relation to prosperity, because it's so important.
Yeah, and I'm very curious, like something you said that caught my attention about the masculine imbalance itself. So I know there's the imbalance between the masculine and the feminine, but then so what am I understanding that correctly, that there can be an imbalance within each of these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the masculine out of balance could also be known, some kind of a buzz term right now that a lot of people are using is toxic masculinity. It's when the masculine is it's actually too, it's out of balance. There's too much masculine and not enough feminine. So where you often see that is, that we're that driver. We need that driver, right, to get things done in the masculine. But when it becomes too much, like when you think of like the workhorse or the demanding spouse, like, or, and again, it can happen with men and women, but I know a lot of women that I work with, they admit that that's a problem for them. Like they expect too much from their partner and they're always driving, right? Toxic or the masculine out of balance could be, what's another example? Yeah, like a very masculine person who maybe yells too much, or yeah, or when you think of toxic masculinity in society, right? Like what is the mansplaining? It just comes to mind for
Yes,
some
yes.
reason. So yeah, it's quite an interesting topic, and something that has only become part of my awareness maybe a few years ago, and I'm still learning about it. But it makes perfect sense when thinking about the yin and the yang and the balance of the universe, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so how would an imbalance in the feminine look like? How does that show up? This is so helpful. This is amazing. So incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So an imbalance in the feminine, so it's usually um, it's the extreme form of, so feminine represents receivership, right? Receiving, right? Um, so it's often when someone has a hard time accepting a gift, right? They have a hard time accepting a gift, like they feel like they don't deserve it. They might feel like embarrassed for showing emotion. And when you think of like expressing or expressive and creation, like those are very feminine attributes. Maybe somebody who has always wanted to be an artist, but they are struggling with, oh, I need to go out and do something, like that's not acceptable. Like a lot of kids they're raised with the idea that an acceptable job is, an engineer or a doctor or whatever. So, but it's all about just stepping into that juicy, feminine, receiving, flowy state, right? It's often either it's not even in your awareness because you've been so in the masculine, right? That's been the dominant trait for so long. So I hope that clarifies.
That totally does. Yeah. Yeah, it's so intriguing to me, like how not only this imbalance, and I think so many people have it and they don't even know that they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And this awareness around that would be so helpful to just keep in mind. And it's not, my sense is it's not just about money, right? Like it's not about, I know we're talking specifically today about money, prosperity, consciousness, and that, but in general, like this can also show up in other areas. Like I see that many of my clients don't struggle with money, but they struggle with overworking, overgiving, overdoing, because that's what they're trained to do. They're so in their masculine. I love what you said. We have such a
Yeah,
masculine society.
we do. And I
And
mean, imagine, oh, sorry. just imagine the possibilities if you allowed that feminine energy, that receivership to come in, right? I have chills just talking about it, because there's, if I know that money may or may not be an issue with your listeners, but imagine what more could come in as a result of honoring the feminine, of doing less, of working less, of receiving, of wearing something pretty and feeling pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that this is not just for women, right? Like this is about any like it's not gender
It
specific.
is not gender specific.
It is
It's
just
not.
about receiving. It's just about being open. And yeah. And my clients don't generally don't seem to struggle with money, but I know that many of my listeners do. So that's
Mm,
different. Like I feel like, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it in, because I see that with my listeners, like some of the messages I've gotten was about this, because this is create your vibrant life. Life means all aspects of life.
yeah,
Money is definitely one big aspect of the way we live our life, isn't it?
it sure is. I mean, it's something that I personally fought for a long time, until I realized that, you know, without money, you don't have a business. Without money, it's a tool, right, to get to next level. So,
Yeah, and speaking
yeah,
of which, I'm wondering if you can again speak to your experience, like your personal experience about how you overcame some of these money limiting beliefs.
yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, I was raised in a home where, my parents both had businesses. They were self-employed, and I specifically remember when my dad opened his business and the electricity went out a couple of times. And, it was just money doesn't grow on trees was something that I heard a lot in my house. Money doesn't grow on
So
trees.
I'm curious, like when that things like that would happen,
Yeah.
what were what impressions, like, or what did you start to believe, like at that time, like because this is what I've seen with my clients and working with people for so long,
Yeah.
that on one hand, like if you just think about, oh, the electricity went out, right? Like on one hand, it has no meaning, but as children, we try to make sense of our environment,
Hmm.
and we give it some kind of story, and then that story sticks with us. I'm curious, like what was the story that stuck with you about that?
Yeah. It equated to fear, right? That
Mm,
money's going to run out. I'm going to be cold, right? My parents are working so hard, and the electricity went out. And there's plenty of stories I have about that, with even like it translated into shopping. Like my mom would take me to go shopping for back to school, and I would feel guilty. So there was this feeling of guilt often, that I was
yeah.
burdening my parents because they bought me something that I needed. So that was something that was always, and it's funny how it shows up, because it is very subconscious. It's something that I still have to work through every single day, is letting go of the shame, letting go of the fear. Everything always has been, is, and will be fine. And money is abundant. But I think you asked specifically about realizing it. It was really until I started to hire people to help me with this. And I could tell you the exact day I did it. It was November of 2016 when I hired my first coach, because I had no
Wow.
idea about, I feel like if I had heard this podcast 5 years ago, it would have just helped me so much to know that it's infinite. This is infinite. Money is infinite, right? And by worrying and being shameful, and I feel like there's this sense of embarrassment, right? Like, oh, I just bought myself a new car, but I don't want anybody to know. I don't want my family to know, because they'll judge me or they'll be jealous, right? Show off that car, be proud. And so, yeah, shame and fear, I guess, to answer your question, is what comes up.
Yeah, and that's so true what you're saying, Angela, that this is so unconscious and subconscious. Like when I tell my parents, or my dad's know more, but when my mom, like if I tell her some of these things that I picked up from my childhood, she's like in shock because that that was not her experience. This was what I made of that experience, and I was still carrying it for so long. It's amazing to watch that, to see, even see like, oh my god, like they don't believe that, like I've carried on that belief but they don't. And
It's
then,
eye-opening, isn't it? To spend
oh
time with family and remember, like, oh, I used to think this.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then being able to let go of that. Yeah, and that's amazing. Like you decided that I'm done, I'm not going to carry this story anymore, and be done with it. And
Done.
it's work every day, isn't it?
It's work every day. And I think you've mentioned this to your audience before too. It's watching your thoughts like a hawk every single day. And sometimes they're sneaky, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Like,
so sneaky.
but just doing the best that you can every single day. And when those thoughts come in, having the tools to be able to stop that dead in its tracks or work through it if it's a, some kind of thing that needs to be worked through, depending on what's coming up.
Yeah. So what would you like to share with the visionaries listening on how to work with some of these money stuff that might be coming up for them?
Mm. That is a great question. I think the first thing to do is just decide that this is something that you want to put in your awareness, right? Like, okay, this is something that's coming up. I've been noticing that this belief from when I was 10 is still coming into my awareness. I think the first thing is just to have awareness, right? And to be kind to yourself and to be patient with yourself. And then bit by bit, like we mentioned, having an awareness of your thoughts when they come up. And there are certain tools that you can use to stop them dead in their tracks. And if it's something that's like shame, I think, or guilt, sometimes I think that takes a little more examining. But if it's just like this ridiculous like story that just makes no sense, if it's the ego, right, trying to get in the way, sometimes it's just a matter of thought stopping and saying, yeah, this is not happening, and changing your attention, moving your attention to something else. So, noticing the thought come in, stopping it, and refocusing. Like, okay, I'm choosing to focus on writing in my journal for 5 minutes. Or I'm choosing to look at the blue sky or the orange leaves outside, whatever it is. Something that's positive, has a positive vibration to it. And lastly, yeah, I would say, if you are somebody that either you realize this has been a problem and it's kind of feeling like a struggle, and you really want to work on this, I really highly recommend working with a professional to help you with it, or getting into an accountability group, maybe with other people who are maybe a few steps ahead of you, right? Like it feels like you're almost uncomfortable to join this group, like whether it be a mastermind or a peer group, and have that accountability every week. Have people that you can report to and say, hey, I'm doing this. Because oftentimes it's just a matter of having that connection with others to change your brain set.
Yeah. Wow. It's so powerful when you start to even just say, okay, I'm not going to show up for this anymore. Acknowledging that this is no longer part of your DNA almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what it is. It's in our DNA cells, and we can choose how we want to show up and how we want it to reflect in our DNA. And we can do this at any time. It doesn't have to be a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm too old to do this, or, I'm not. No, it can happen at any time of your life, whether you're 5 or 905, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever someone says that to me, that I'm too old, I'm like, do you know what age Walt Disney started? Walt Disney.
It was like 60, right? Or
60 or 65. Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He started Mickey Mouse when he was 60 or 65. And he did, everybody advised him not to do it. And he said, nope, do it. Yeah.
And thank goodness he did.
I know. My kids still enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome.
This was so amazing, Angela. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. So where can people find you and where do you hang out most?
Well, you can find me mostly on Instagram at I am Angela Noelle. And then I'm on LinkedIn and all the social media outlets, or you can find me on my website, angelanoelleinternational.com.
And you also have a podcast.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I do have a podcast called The Empowered Warrior. So you can find me there as well if you want more of this kind of stuff. I talk about prosperity a lot.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yes. And I'll put everything in the show notes as well so people can find you. So, so honored to have you here. And any last parting words of wisdom to the listeners?
I would say, if you've been listening to Padma or you're listening to this episode and something is just feeling like you feel that something is lighting up within you, whether it be like chills or excitement, that is your inner wisdom talking to you. And I invite you to go out and figure out what that is that you can do to live your vibrant life.
Oh, I love that. I love that. How often we don't tap into our own wisdom, right? We don't pay attention to what we're feeling.
No. But hopefully that's shifting.
Yes. Yes.
It is shifting, actually. Not hopefully, it is shifting. I can feel it.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Angela. And
thank you, Padma. Great talking to you. Great seeing you.
Yes. Same.
Bye.